All right, let us start. And as more people trickle in today, we will make sure that they join us. So just so you're aware, we do have live translation today. We have our ASL interpreters with us, as well as a Spanish interpreter. So if you haven't used this new Zoom function yet, here are some instructions of how you can change to the Spanish channel to get this live translated for you. So if you're on a PC, you're going to click that little globe icon at the bottom right of your screen to select a language, and you're going to select either English or Spanish, and then select mute original audio. So if you would like the English channel, click English. If you would like to hear today's event in Spanish, please click Spanish. And when you're done, click the done function. If you're on your phone or tablet, click the more option. So that's those three little dots located at the bottom of your screen, and then select the language interpretation button. It'll either be text or like a little globe. Select your language interpretation, select English or Spanish, and then mute original audio. And Beatrice is sharing the Spanish translation of that into the Q&A for you all. So if you are joining us and would like Spanish interpretation this evening, you're able to, you'll be able to access it that way. A couple of things that you need to know. We are recording tonight's event, so we will have this posted on our website and YouTube channels for later use. We also are trying to live stream this. We are currently running into a couple of hiccups with the live stream, but we are working on it, and we'll get that up and running as soon as we can. Like I said, the chat function has been turned off, but you are welcome to use the Q&A function for this evening. So please put your questions or comments to the panelists in the Q&A function of the Zoom. You can click the icon that looks like two little talking bubbles to open it, type your question, and just click send. So it should look something like this on the right-hand picture here. Finally, just some Healthi Kids warm welcome housekeeping items for you all. If you haven't been to a Healthi Kids event or meeting before, this might be new to you, but if you are one of our old-time friends, then you know kids are always welcome. So we know that it is the evening time, that people are cooking dinner, kids are just back from school. They are welcome to join in and out of the Zoom meeting. If you need to take that break, take that break. We know that this is an evening meeting and we'll be together for a while. So do what you gotta do. We trust and honor you. In the Q&A, please speak your truth. If you have questions or comments or things you wanna share, please share them openly with us. We wanna hear your questions, thoughts in the Q&A function. And finally, we're all here together, so we're going to respect one another and move forward together as we celebrate this community vision for playful learning. So our agenda tonight is jam-packed. We're going to start off with a quick welcome and setting the stage. Then I'm going to turn it over to Common Ground Health CEO, Wade Norwood. And from there, we have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Brian Wright, who will be our keynote for this evening. And then we will spend some time talking about what did we learn over this crazy endeavor, and what is the Rochester's vision for playful learning in the Rochester City School District. And we're going to talk about some next steps and how you all can get involved in this work. So a little bit about Healthi Kids before we launch. So at Healthi Kids, we are an initiative of Common Ground Health. Common Ground Health is a regional health planning organization. We serve the 9-county Finger Lakes region here in Rochester, New York, in Western New York. And as a team, we are bringing folks together to address regional health disparities and improve the health of our region overall. Healthi Kids is our kids initiative. So we know we can improve the health of the region if we are not looking at the way our kiddos are set up for success early in life. And so established in 2008, we have the Healthi Kids Coalition has been around advocating for policy systems and environmental change that support whole child health. So really looking at kids' physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development. We bring together more than 80 community advocates, many residents, neighborhood leaders, and groups, and we pair those with some of our organizational partners here doing amazing work in the Rochester community. And that coalition is staffed by 10 staff members. So many of our team are here today, and we are all here supporting our coalition. Healthi Kids, really, our mission is simple. We believe that every child needs that village, the connected community of caring adults to support them, and the safe and supportive environments that will allow them to thrive. But we know that we're not going to be able to do that without abolishing inequities in Rochester and the Finger Lakes region caused by racism, adverse childhood experiences, poverty, gender discrimination, ableism, and community violence to support the health and well-being of our youngest children. We have a 4-plank policy agenda that really highlights 4 major portfolios of our work that our coalition is pushing forward. I'm not going to go into all 4 because today we are here to talk about the power of play. These are the policy goals that we are working towards. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, but really today we are here about safeguarding play as a cornerstone of school learning for our kids in our district. Our portfolio around play is led by our PlayROCs Advocacy Committee, which is a 32-member committee predominantly made of Rochester residents, caregivers, community partners, all who care about maximizing the potential of play in schools and neighborhoods. And that team has done a lot over the last 6 years together, from changing city policy, creating new programs, really leading substantial changes in their neighborhood. And back before even the pandemic started, that team shared with Healthi Kids staff that we have to bring that momentum that we've seen in Rochester's neighborhoods to the Rochester City School District. And that concern was only exacerbated as we saw COVID-19 and its impacts on our kids and our community. And so that's why we're all here. That's what PlayROCs the RCSD is all about. It is about building a collective vision for playful learning in the district. It's about working together. We brought together a number of community partners and resident leaders to lead this work as part of the planning team. Starting 8 months ago. And we really wanted to develop that vision, make sure that youth and family voice were centered, amplify those community bright spots, and educate, advocate, and coordinate for change. And so we're so excited you're all here today to join us as we kick off what we've learned over the last 8 months. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Wade Norwood. And just a little bit about Wade, if you don't all know. Rochester native, Wade has held leadership positions in the community for more than 3 decades, including roles in public service, education, and healthcare. Wade has served at Common Ground Health since 2006 and has been our CEO since 2018. Norwood has pushed the organization to embrace health equity for all Finger Lakes region residents. From 1990 to 2005, Norwood served as Rochester City Council member and chair of the council's Committee on Housing and Community Development. And since 2009, he has served as an at-large member of the New York State Board of Regents. At the state and local level, he also co-chairs the New York State Department of Health's work group on healthcare workforce and the Region Systems Integration Initiative, and is a member of the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Commission. On a national level, he serves on the board of Civitas Networks for Health. He is president and senior pastor at Holy Jerusalem Spiritual Church in Rochester, and he and his wife, Lisa Hardy Norwood, have 2 adult children. And so Wade, I am going to turn it over to you to kick us off today.
Jen, thank you very much, and I appreciate that gracious introduction. And I will be brief and hand it right back over to you. But before I begin, in addition to saying thank you to you, I'd also like to say thank you to Sasha Lewis, a parent leader who will follow me on our program. And thank you to Commissioner LeBron, one of Jen and my co-workers, superstar, along with Jen on our Healthi Kids team, and a dear friend. And I'd like to thank and give honor to the other organizers of this incredible virtual gathering for their hard work pulling this together and for inviting me to offer remarks during our time together this evening. I'd also like to give honor to Dr. Wright, our keynote speaker. And I'd like to give honor to all of you that are here tonight in this Zoom room, knowing the duties to which you are each called. Just allow me to assure you that your community appreciates and values your sacrifice and your service. And I want to thank you for being present tonight, because you are part of the movement to launch a vision for playful learning in our community, and for helping us prove that play not only does play work, but play rocks. My colleagues at Common Ground Health know that one of my favorite aphorisms is George Cours's observation that play is the brain's preferred way of learning. And this quote points out the seriousness of our work, because quite honestly, this favorite way of learning isn't equitably open to all of our children. In fact, our recent regional health survey surfaced that only about 25% of our city's neighbors believe that their neighborhood is a great place for their children to play outdoors. That's 3 times worse. And so I want to thank you for being part of the momentum of this campaign for play, and for sharing your treasure with children, adults, and families from all walks of life who have joined you in this effort to reclaim our neighborhoods as the right places for our children to play, to expand opportunities for an understanding of inclusive play, and to build new beginnings for a lifetime of social and emotional growth and development through the God-given right to just go outside and play. Eleanor Roosevelt once noted that the giving of love is an education in itself. And so as we advance in this work, as we strengthen the partnerships between schools, neighborhoods, parks, and recreation centers, ours is the responsibility to remember that this is part of education. This is the heart of education. And that we're engaged in the most important work we could possibly do on behalf of our children and their families. We're giving love. And as the city of Susan B. Anthony, seeking to still defy convention, as we aim to be the children of Frederick Douglass and own the fact that without struggle, there is no progress, we must hold on to the thing that really unites us in this very special work. The thing that is the essential building block for community, for families, and for children: the giving of love. And giving love requires courage, my friends. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and this pandemic is no time for hunkering down or for playing it safe or thinking to the devil take the hindmost. The fierce urgency of now requires meeting the strong and active challenge of Daisy Reinhardt's poem. I'm tired of sailing my little boat far inside of the harbor bar. I want to go out where the big ships float, out on the deep where the great ones are. And should my frail craft prove too slight for storms that sweep these wide seas o'er, better to go down in the stirring fight than drowse to death by the sheltered shore. Thank you for being here tonight. Jen, back in your hands.
Thank you, Wade. I have the pleasure of introducing Sasha Lewis. If you don't know Sasha, she is one of our amazing parent advocates on the Healthi Kids Coalition. She has been a member for a long time in our work together. She is a mother, village, auntie, village, everything to all kids in the district. And so I am going to turn it over to you, Sasha, to introduce our keynote for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Wright. Dr. Brian Wright is an associate professor and program coordinator of early childhood education in the Department of Instruction and Curriculum, leadership in the College of Education, and coordinator of the middle school cohort of the African American Male Academy at the University of Memphis. Dr. Wright teaches undergraduate and graduate level courses that include culture and learning, indigenous and decolonized philosophies and epistemologies, critical pedagogies, and masculinity in urban schools. His research examines high achieving African American boys in urban schools pre-K through 12, racial ethnic identity development of boys, STEM and African American boys pre-K through 12, African American males as early childhood teachers, and teacher identity development. Dr. Wright has published articles in Urban Education, Theory into Practice, and the Journal of Negro Education, to name a few. He has co-authored articles that have appeared in Young Children, Teaching Young Children, Exchange, Childhood Explorer, Gifted Child Today, Handbook on Gifted Education, Psychology Forum, Journal of African American Males in Education, Boyhood Studies, and many others. Dr. Wright is a consulting editor for the National Association for the Education of Young Children, a journal reviewer for several academic journals, and past organizer and co-leader of a special interest forum entitled Educating Black Boys and Adolescent Males with Childhood Education International. He has given several keynote addresses and countless workshops and presented his research at local, state, and national conferences. Dr. Wright consults locally and nationally about the education of Black boys. Dr. Wright is listed via Rise for Boys and Men of Color Expert Directory, which is a searchable directory of more than 100 researchers and evaluators who rigorously and routinely study boys and men of color and evaluate programs to serve them. Dr. Wright is also a 2021 National Association for the Education of Young Children President's Emerging Leaders Circle Fellow and the author of the award-winning bestseller book, The Brilliance of Black Boys, Cultivating School Success in Early Grades, and lead co-editor of Gumbo for the Soul. 3, Males of Color Sharing Their Stories, Meditations, Affirmations, and Inspirations, Contemporary Perspectives on Multicultural Gifted Education. Dr. Wright is lead co-author of Black Boys Are Lit, Engaging Young Gifted and Talented Black Boys Using Multicultural Literature, and Ford's Bloombank's Matrix. Dr. Wright is co-editor of the 4th edition of Developmentally Appropriate Practice in Early Childhood Programs Serving Children from Birth through Age 8. Dr. Wright earned his PhD in Applied Child Development from the Elliott Person Department of Child Study and Human Development at Tufts University, Medford, Massachusetts. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Wright here to Rochester.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Sasha, for that warm introduction. That was a lot there. Thank you to Jen and to the entire committee for inviting me to be a part of this transformative moment. I'm honored to be a part of what is a brilliant movement to articulate a vision that says to us that whole children, whole families, and whole communities matter. And so as my keynote address, I started thinking about title. I know that people often don't understand the power of play, but after reviewing carefully your infographic that was developed and so many other information that was provided to me, I decided that I would title my presentation, "What's Play Got to Do with It?" Reimagining and recapturing the freedom and spirit of free play in cultured spaces. And so I hope that in this talk this evening, that you will come away with some important knowledge that you will be able to use as you go forward with your movement and articulation of a vision that embodies play, that is representative of the diverse groups of children that you serve in Rochester. And so here are some of the goals and objectives of my presentation. So in the spirit of playful learning, I want to spend some time having us examine play and playful learning as developmental concepts through the lens of race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want us to challenge some of the beliefs and practices that seek to limit access and opportunities to engage in playful learning experiences toward equity and certainly joyful learning. And then I want to leave you with a way to sort of think about moving forward by creating an identity-safe, playful learning experiences for all children, but in particular children from non-dominant groups and those children who have been historically underserved and historically marginalized. And so those are the goals and objectives for this talk. And I want to begin with a quote from Fred Rogers. You know, people often think of play as this sort of relief from serious work in which children are engaged within the context of school or at home, but it's much more than that. And so to be direct, play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of childhood. And so I want to underscore Fred Rogers' poignant quote, and I want to pull that through my presentation tonight. And so by the end of this presentation, you will know, for those of you who may have questions about the power of play, that when we answer the question, what's play got to do with it? It has a lot to do with it in terms of developing healthy, well-rounded children, families, and communities. And so reflect on this quote as we move forward. So why play? I think the question has been answered, but I want to just highlight a few things that we know that free play and guided play together constitute this sort of concept of playful learning. And certainly within this community, you all have decided on how you're defining the sort of concept of playful learning. And so I want to underscore what you've already done and build on that, because playful learning is really about how children learn in joyful and culturally rich ways. And when I say culturally rich ways, it's when we draw on what children learn in their homes and in their communities as relevant for in-school experiences and for expanding what they know. And so research certainly establishes that there is an important relationship or relationships between children's play and aspects of development. And I think you might have encountered this in your own research in terms of language. And so we have to ask questions of what's the play in language and what's the language in play? Mathematics and spatial skills. Where's the play in mathematics? Where's the play in scientific thinking? And play in terms of having the benefits of social emotional development. And so here are some of the reasons that exist in the literature. This is not an exhausted list, but it highlights some of the central ways in which play matters and why play is important. And so there are also 4 important ingredients of successful play. According to brain science, play is important in part because it occurs best when children are mentally active, as opposed to the often passive ways in which schooling and experiences inside of schools, and in some cases outside of school, happen. Engaged and not distracted, socially interactive with peers or adults, and building meaningful connections in the lives of children. And so it's important to think about this sort of background information. And I'm laying the sort of case for my argument on why it's important to think about identity-safe play environments for children. And so what are the benefits of play? I think there can be a number of things that are often discussed. Play offers children the opportunity to see and see anew, to feel and to hear the liberatory possibilities of healing that we heard earlier, joy, love, and liberation. And so I urge you to reflect in the moment on the remarkable ways in which in time of crisis, when there are challenges, children find within them the spirit of play, and they're able to engage in play amid often a world that sometimes threatens their very existence. And I'm going to talk more later in this presentation about the ways in which the world threatens the existence of some children along lines of race, class, gender, ability, and disability, because childhoods are unequal along those lines. And I want to complicate this notion of play in terms of access and opportunity. And so now that we have this sort of background, here's what we know. And here's what I learned after looking at the infographic that was created with your many partners, from what I've learned from visiting your Healthi Kids, Common Ground, websites, Rochester City schools, etc., is that play certainly is a radical and liberatory activity. So it's transformative. It can make a difference in the lives of children. Children and adolescents, according to research, requires at least 60 minutes or more of active physical play or playful learning per day. And so this notion of being free, uninhibited, and the opportunity to just be allowed to play is very important as we think about the vital need for cognitive, social, and emotional childhood development. And so play should be this opportunity for children to imagine, reimagine. It's an opportunity to humanize who they are and the contexts in which they come from. And sometimes play can be child-directed, and at other times it can be adult facilitated or teacher facilitated. And some of the things that I have learned from your infographic is that you have listed a number of ways in which playful learning experiences can unfold. And so we have a responsibility and an opportunity to both develop, to nourish, and protect this liberatory environments that encourage play. And so given what we know, I want to now complicate this by thinking about when child's play is both limited and or denied. And so we learn that children's and adolescents' play certainly varies from a developmentally age-appropriate standpoint and along lines of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status in terms of access, opportunity, etc. And so I really want us to think about some of the research that I've encountered in sort of preparing for this talk. And there's self-reports and research that reveals that African American, Hispanic, and children ages 9 to 13 from lower income backgrounds and those living in poverty get less leisure time, physical activity, and so I have some things in parentheses, than do white or higher income children of the same age. Other research found children at schools that schedule 30 minutes of recess for everyone, the minimum allowed, are more likely to be children of color, lower income, living in poverty, and learning English. And other scholars have found schools that average 45 minutes of recess or more tend to have whiter, wealthier student populations. And so there's a problem here. And so what do you believe is contributing to these disparities in play when we consider that overwhelmingly schools that serve Black and brown children, children for whom English is not their first language, have this sort of rigid schedule of 30 minutes at best, compared to their more affluent peers who are given the luxury of 45 minutes or more. And so there's something to be said about this issue in terms of equity and access when we consider that there are groups of children, given what we know about the benefits of play from brain science, from child development, from early childhood education research, this becomes real problem of thinking more deeply about systemic and structural inequalities and how they manifest through play. And so I want to talk about the ways in which Black and brown bodies in motion often experience the things around inequities, racism, and discrimination. And so there tends to be this sort of hypervigilant or the hypervigilant eye, or otherwise known in the academic literature, the white gaze, in which Black and brown children often find themselves in settings in which they're watched and they don't feel welcome. And so I want to repeat that. There is this tendency when Black and brown children are in motion, there is moments in which they often feel that they're being watched and they're not welcome. This is both in and outside of schools. In 2014, I think we all recall that police killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice as he played with a toy gun at a Cleveland recreation. And to add to that, routinely Black and brown children are not necessarily viewed in the same light of innocence and deserving of the same nurture and protection as white children. Thus, for Black and brown children, the white gaze can really have deleterious effects in terms of it adultifies them, it dehumanizes them, it criminalizes their bodies in motion, and their play, which is often grounded in cultural ways of thinking, speaking, and acting, is often viewed from a place of violence. And so we have to ask the question, why is it when white children play, it's seen as idyllic, it's normative, it's viewed in a way that promotes this idea of healthy play, but when Black and brown children play, it's viewed as problematic, it's pathologized, it's seen as violent, etc. And so in case you're wondering about the definition of adultification, it means schools and society are less protective and more punitive with certain children, and they make assumptions about where they are developmentally, and they treat them accordingly, which is grounded in white supremacy and other ideologies and philosophies that continue to frame how we think, talk, write, and engage Black and brown children. And while I'm not necessarily making the case that this is simply a Black-white binary, because I can complicate this further to include other racial ethnic groups. But when we think about the Office of Civil Rights data that I'm going to show momentarily, you will understand why I've chosen to focus on white, Hispanic, using that term for utility and broadly, and on African and Black students. So keep in mind this idea of, given what we know about the value and the importance of play, why is it that we're finding that certain children from certain communities have limited access and opportunity to play as a result of the skin that they're in and the communities in which they live? And so I want to turn to race, gender, and play. And so I highlight this in much of my research, and that is the essence of innocence, the consequences of dehumanizing Black children, and we can certainly add brown children as well. Published in the gold standard of the American Psychological Association, found that Black boys as young as 10 years old, just 2 years shy of early childhood, which is pre-K 3rd grade. So thinking about 4-year-olds to 8-year-olds, when that's over, moving into middle childhood as a 10-year-old, still very young, are not viewed in the same light of childhood innocence as their white peers, but are instead more likely to be mistaken for older, be perceived as guilty, and face police violence if accused of a crime. So this is Goff et al.'s work. And so more recently highlighted in Black Lives Matter at school, it documents incidences where Black and brown children experience adultification and the policing of their Black bodies in motion. A 10-year-old Black boy was charged with assault for playing dodgeball, something that we all recall from our own childhoods, the joy, the delight in being able to dodge that ball and to be victorious if you're able to win and be the last child standing, and certainly the skill to which you're able to throw the ball to get people out. And so this childhood experience, this play, has been criminalized and adultified in a Black body. And when we compare the experiences of race and gender as it relates to girls, it's even more troubling. And so race and gender tend to circumscribe the experiences of Black and brown children, both in and out of school. And by that I mean, rather than seeing children, they are often held to particular standards and engaged in very problematic ways, in part because of race and also gender. So published in the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality. And so I know that you can certainly read these, but I'm reading this for effect because I think it's important not to miss any of the points that are highlighted here. Found that Black girls are also viewed as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers. In fact, a snapshot of the data revealed that Black girls as early as 5 years of age were perceived as needing less nurturing, less protection, needing less support, less comfort, were more independent, knew more about adult topics, and knew about sex. So notice 5 years old, kindergarten, extremely young, vulnerable, impressionable, and here we are adultifying, we are criminalizing, we are dehumanizing this. And so imagine if we have these stereotypes and these beliefs that give way to attitudes, beliefs that manifest in problematic practices, you can imagine what impact this has on children, families, and communities of color. And so I want to look more broadly at some national data. So these data are from the Office for Civil Rights. They're reported biennially every 2 years. And as you can see from the pie, and this is public school data only, that overwhelmingly public schools are populated by white students at 50.3%. Hispanic and or Latino of any race at 24.7%, and Black or African American a mere 15.5%. And so we can see the racial demographics here and the imbalance. We can also see in terms of gender that there are more boys represented than girls, and the percentage of English learners and students with disabilities, exceptionalities. So I want to drill down more here and to disaggregate to show you that these data represent 16,758 school districts in the United States, 95,507 schools, and 50,035,744 students. And so again, the gender is here in the breakdown of race. And so while we see that white students and Hispanic students are more in number than Black students, we have to ask questions about, if this is the case, how do we begin to explain suspension of preschool children as early as preschool? And so you can see here that the US Department of Education reports on these data, that while Black children make up only 19% of preschool enrollment, they represent 47% of preschool children receiving one or more out of school suspensions. So in contrast, white children represent 41% of preschool enrollment, but only 28% of suspensions. And so Black boys are also seen in schools and in society often as culpable, as highly problematic. They are labeled bad boys. They are often talked about as troublemakers and suspect and dehumanized first before schools and society see their humanity. And so I'm asking us to think about these data, and we can no longer locate problems and pathologies with children and families. We have to ask the question, what other factors are operating when we see this disparity in terms of discipline and the ways in which zero tolerance policies and other such policies are perpetuated inside of schools and certainly in institutions that are an extension of how we begin to understand life in America. And so we have to begin to challenge, what does this mean for Black and brown bodies? What does this mean for children who wish to engage in playfulness, who wish to be like all other children and experience the joy of childhood, to be a part of a beloved community in which they are valued and seen for their brilliance in a world that's often anti-Black and anti-brown, and the ways in which those sentiments have an impact on whether or not they receive access, opportunity, funding, and resources that allow for this movement that you've decided to embark upon to ensure that all children have access to playful learning experiences, because you recognize that this question of what does play have to do with it? It has a lot to do with it when we consider race, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'd add justice to ensure that all children have access and that there is an equal distribution of access. And so what is necessary in supporting and co-constructing liberatory spaces for children to play? And so I want to acknowledge again, and I have throughout my presentation, the incredible and remarkable work that you have embarked upon. I think that I was impressed right from the start when I met with Jen and her colleagues to learn about the work that you were doing, all in the spirit of ensuring that there is equity of play and there are opportunities in which all children, regardless of their race, gender, socioeconomic status, ability or disability, that they have access to the things that you have captured in terms of redefining and reimagining what playful learning can look like in terms of recess, school clubs, field trips, physical education. So imagine these things and imagine what it must feel like and what it might mean for children whose race, whose gender can impact their ability to have access to the things that you've highlighted here. And so this means that we have to think more deeply about equity. And I'm providing a working definition of equity, so playful learning and equity. And so I'm going to read this in part because there are important points to highlight. Equity refers to the ability to point to historical and structural barriers. And I think you've done that, Rochester, by investigating, examining, and uncovering historical and structural barriers that were, and some would argue, intentionally or manufactured, placed in schools, out in society, as norms to both marginalize, to oppress, in some instances repress, and in others objectify and exclude vulnerable populations. And I'm using vulnerable on purpose, in part because when we think about major structural systemic racism and inequalities in society around education, around health, around housing, around economic upward mobility, we have learned through finer points in history of the ways in which both redlining, racial steering, and other such practices have resulted in pushing Black and Brown people, immigrants, and people for whom English is not their first language, further to the margins and on the periphery. And so to seek equity is to commit, as you've done, to identify these barriers, to disrupt, and I'd add, dismantle them, and ensure that there's equitable access and opportunity is available for every child, not just for some, but for all children with regard to playful learning experiences. And so I want to end with the last two slides on how do we create identity-safe, playful learning spaces for all children. And I lead with, because Black and Brown children's play, playful expressions, and playfulness is frequently sort of situated in these ways of people describing it as somehow threatening. In an anti-Black world, it is necessary that we do this certainly for all children, but especially for children who've experienced historically, they've been marginalized and they've experienced unequal childhoods due to no fault of their own, but because of systems and structures that have been put in place that limit opportunities for them to learn and have access and to experience this notion of joyful learning. So the tenets involved in this identity-safe, playful learning is child-centered. And I think children are at the center of your vision to articulate the importance of playful learning experiences. It's thinking about making sure that children know that they can be autonomous. It's listening to their voices. It's encouraging their agency, letting children know that they have a say in the kinds of co-constructing the experiences with regard to playful learning. So when I think about field trips, what do children want to be exposed to? What do they want to experience on field trips in and around the Rochester area, the New York area, and more expansively, thinking in other ways? Also cultivating race, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as resources or a resource. And we use that lens to challenge school curriculum that has not always reflected the demographics of the classroom, that have not always promoted the familiarity of the experiences of all children, both in terms of their languages, their literacies, and their cultural practices, ensuring that instruction is both relevant and it is responsive and responsible to the children in which we're teaching, and practices that really do reflect the racial demography and the gifts and talents and the brilliance that you certainly know and I know reside in all children, but in this case, Black and Brown children. Challenging policies that attempt to restrict playful learning experiences. So when we think about the ways in which field trips have been used in some districts as punitive, so when children have misbehaved for particular fractions, they have been kept back from educational field trips, an opportunity to expose them to a wealth of experiences, whether I think about here in Memphis, the National Civil Rights Museum, which is the official assassination site of Dr. Martin Luther King. And so can you imagine a child having the opportunity to experience that history and be denied that in part because of policies around behavior? And it's important to understand that these preschool expulsions that I mentioned earlier are not child behaviors, they are adult decisions. And so I want to underscore that these preschool expulsions that are dismal that I mentioned previously are not child behaviors, they are adult decisions. And so classroom relationships, this is authentic care, is grounded in play learning experiences in which teachers, adults to children and children to children in and outside of school are protected. They are loved, they are nurtured, celebrated, and prioritized, which is what you're doing in Rochester, which is what your CEO, Mr. Wade Norwood, mentioned in his remarks from the outset, the importance of this beloved community in which children are affirmed, they experience love, they're nurtured, they're celebrated. And the last two are caring environments. And in this caring environment, children feel that they are free to be emotionally safe and they feel comfortable. And that's embedded in all of the playful learning experiences. And in those experiences, there's beauty, joy, happiness, and especially equity is center. It's not an afterthought. It's not an add-on. It's centrally located. So when children see and feel that adults are acting out of care for their whole selves, and by that I mean, we see you, we hear you, we are you, then certainly they feel that they are part of something that's wonderful, a community of people who care deeply about their ability not just to survive, but their ability to thrive. And then there's the notion of equitable environments, this idea of fairness that eliminates racial inequities related to access and opportunity, so that little boys and girls, if they choose to enter into a park, a public park, that their bodies are not criminalized. They're not seen as adults when they're merely children enacting play. And we have people calling police or law enforcement, asking no questions, and the loss of life happens instantly. And I think we have finer points in history to call upon the life of Emmett Till, who also lost his life while engaged in joyful play with his cousins that he was visiting while in Mississippi, not far away from Memphis, where he lost his life, only to learn later that Carolyn Bryant falsified the information that cost this little boy his life. And he was adultified long before we even had the term, dehumanized and criminalized. And he lost his life, as his mother, Mamie Till, who has since passed away, also fought for justice for her son. And so creating identity-safe, playful learning spaces really requires us to be unapologetic in our pursuit to ensure that every child has access, has opportunity to joyful learning, and learning that is both developmentally and age appropriate, that is responsive and responsible to their brilliance in terms of what we know resides in our children. And so I leave you with this quote from Ernesto Che Guevara, and that is, the basic clay of our work is the children. We place our hope in them and prepare them to take the banner from our hands. And I think many of you may have different interpretations, but for me, is that we are here to do this important work of guiding children. And we know if we want to invoke other ways in which people and materials have talked about children, and a child shall lead them. And so this idea that if we set up the right kinds of conditions and we create the right kinds of opportunities that are structured for our children, they will, with confidence, with their brilliance, take from us the mantle, and they will go forward and do this important work again and again. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity to share just a few remarks on what I learned from figuring out all the things in which you all brought together a cross-section of families, community partners, student voices, and other resources to create this articulation of the importance of playful learning. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. We are just all blown away, I'm sure.
Do I stop share now so that we
can? Yeah, you can stop the share. We are going to actually open up conversation right now and some opportunity for some Q&A. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Beatrice, who will lead that. Please keep your questions and comments coming in the Q&A function, team, so that we can have this conversation now with Dr. Wright. Beatrice, I turn it to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Wright, for your brilliant presentation. Like we're so excited to have you and honored for you to share all of your work and research in this field and work. I do have one question so far from Sanford, which we call Sandy. It says something is dreadfully wrong with our preschools. And have they gathered data on the racial makeup of preschool teachers as well as what they are paid?
I think that's a great question. And yes, we do have data on the racial makeup of teachers. And we do know, and we've known this for quite some time, that teachers who work in early care and education, and teachers in general, P12, are woefully underpaid. And we know that we have not figured out how to increase pay. But I will say, because I've been in the field of early childhood for almost 30 years, and that is that increasingly early childhood is overwhelmingly female and it's overwhelmingly white, many of whom have grown up in insular environments where they've had little opportunity to challenge notions of racial, ethnic, religious, and other forms of diversity. Also, they've not necessarily had opportunities to challenge their position in the world and what that means. And I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that in order to be effective with other people's children, that you need to match racially, ethnically, or in terms of gender. But what I'm saying is that if you have not done the work of interrogating your own attitudes, beliefs, values, and how those manifest in practice, and by practice, I mean your ability to plan curriculum and instruction as a teacher, your ability to deliver effective instruction, and your ability to manage the multicultural, multi-ethnic classroom climate, then you're going to enter into classrooms with those unchecked, unexamined attitudes, and you're going to perpetuate them on our children. And so you're going to see behavior that is unrecognizable to you, and you will see it as problematic when it's behavior that's situated in legacies and cultures of children. So it's important that we prepare teachers, and I'm saying in terms of teacher education, prepare them in a way that they are not just steeped in content, that's important, and that they have sophisticated pedagogical practices, but they also have done the necessary and ongoing work of interrogating and examining their attitudes, their beliefs, and values, and how they manifest in practice. Sorry, I'm long-winded. I hope that answers the question.
It does. I hope it does too. And let me see, there is another question here. Where can we start in helping teachers understand that the behaviors that they are seeing can be better addressed through play?
I think that's a great question. First of all, we have to educate in teacher education on the value and the importance of play. And so you notice at the outset of my presentation, I provided very basic information that I knew there was a shared common understanding or assumptions about play. But what is often not discussed when we talk about play is the notion of play, race, gender, and equity. And so we often talk about play from the standpoint of white children in the same way that we talk about standardized testing from the standpoint of juxtaposing white students and their achievement or lack thereof, and Black and brown students and their achievement and the lack thereof. And the notion of standardize, it assumes that everyone coming to the testing site is coming with the same set of experiences. And we know that childhoods are unequal. You know this in Rochester. So it really requires us to complicate, to layer, to nuance the notion of play when we're introducing it to teacher candidates and even those who've been in the field. So both in-service and pre-service teachers need refreshers on the value of play and what play means in terms of brain sciences, what it means in terms of development, what play is from a sociological standpoint, and what play is from an anthropological standpoint. And that is looking at play and the intersection of culture and learning. So there's not sort of one thing, there is a confluence of factors that we must consider in order to educate. And I think you all said it best, educate, coordinate, and do a number of things to make sure that we are creating this triangulation of data points, that we're giving teachers information that's helpful. And so we have to do that through providing them with theories, providing them with research, providing them with real experiences where they get to apply that knowledge. And also being suspicious sometimes of numbers, because numbers do have a way of dehumanizing and decontextualizing experiences. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. I don't see any more questions. I will open it up last round if anybody wants to throw a question in the chat, but I did have a question when you were talking about identifying it and disrupting. And the question that popped in my head was, what advice would you have for our parents and our family leaders in Rochester who are trying to be interrupters of that lack of equity for their children in the district?
So great question. So I'm impressed with the way in which Rochester chose to give voice, to give space and opportunity for the voices of families. Because often when we talk about schools, often what we talk about what children need, often when we consider education reform, missing from the discourse and dialogue are the voices of families and children. And so I applaud you for being inclusive in that regard. I think they do it by doing what I saw in that infographic that is just amazing, that they begin to do their research. They begin to ask this important question: what has been the experiences of families and children in Rochester? How have they been treated? And how have they responded to access and opportunity with regard to education, and within education, then playful learning? And so how do we arm families, to use the term arm for utility, with knowledge, with skill sets, and with actionable steps so that they can go to their school board meetings, they can go to parent meetings, they can go to their city council and call out the importance of making sure that their children have access to equitable play, that they have opportunities within their community that honor what we know is necessary for children to be healthy in all environments. So I think it sounds like they're doing some of it, but I think knowledge of the situation, because if you understand from a deep structure, the knowledge, you're better able to challenge and stand up against the opposition that you might receive along the way, because you will, to be able to talk back with data when it's necessary, but data that humanizes the population that you're talking about. Does that answer your question?
It does. So there are 5 more questions now. And so I'm going to randomly select Amari McFadden's. And she writes, oftentimes teachers are left to provide materials for their own classrooms. How do you expect teachers to implement play with little funding? And I think that's actually a really good question.
Sure, I think that's a great question. And I didn't say it today, but I know that when I'm talking about some of the things that we need to consider and think about, I understand the constraints because I was a teacher. I'm not a generalist in the sense that I'm just talking theory and research with no practice, but I've been in the trenches from early Head Start to 3rd grade, 5th, I mean, I can go on. And so I understand that it's very difficult for teachers to figure out, how do we do this sort of playful learning? How do we create opportunities in which play happens when we often don't have resources, et cetera? But I'll say to you that as a teacher who taught in urban schools, I often did not have the resources that were needed. Certainly, I know teachers spend their money for resources, but I know there's something that we all know that's in children inherently to play. And so listening to children and figuring out, how do we create opportunities for them through the resources that we have, I think that cannot be underscored as something important, because I think we can argue all the time that we don't have the resources in terms of funding, but we know that funding, while important, it is not necessarily the be all and end all to joyful learning. I think there are ways in which joyful learning can happen through being creative and being teacher as researcher, and that is investigating, finding out what are those resources that are available. As a teacher, I often brought recycled material into my classroom, and I found ways to look for play in every opportunity. And so part of creating this idea of thinking about language, what's the play in language and what's the language in play? What's the play in math and what's the math in play? And so it requires thinking and also committing yourself to groups of teachers who are also committed to this notion of play, and figuring out, how do we do this together in a way that is responsive and responsible to all children? But it's a fair question. But I think if you consider the work of Healthi Kids in partnership with Rochester City School District, I think it's an impressive way to think about how they've come together to mobilize voices and perspectives to create this powerful infographic that provides a compelling case for why it's necessary to have resources, but also create the space and make space for playful learning.
Thank you. Jen, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thanks. So a big thank you from all of us at Healthi Kids and from Common Ground Health to Dr. Brian Wright, to I know everybody on the call this evening. You know, this was amazing, Brian. And, you know, we don't have time to answer all of the questions we got in today, but to everybody that is on the call, please stay on, because a lot of your questions I feel like will get answered by when we share the vision for playful learning. So just, sorry, give me a second as I share my screen again. And we will share what that vision is. So Dr. Wright talked a lot about this infographic. We are so thrilled to say that we will be sharing that out on our website. You'll get a glimpse of it now, of what this vision for playful learning is in the district tonight. And we will actually be in the process of writing a report on this that will be released next month. So more details on that to come now. So what is this vision for playful learning in the Rochester City School District? So throughout the last 8 months, staff at Healthi Kids have really partnered with a number of child serving organizations, with family leaders, student leaders, to build this together. And so we've had a 25-member planning committee really create this process. We have hosted 3 convening sessions where we brought together 76 RCSD families, students, and organizational partners to get their thoughts and feedback. We have hosted table talk conversations where we sat down and talked to 30 students and families in the district. And we've had a survey open in the spring and summer where we've received 115 responses from RCSD students and families. So over the course of this last year, we have heard from hundreds of RCSD students and family members from our organizational partners to really build this together. And what we've learned is that playful learning is important to RCSD families and students. So 94% of RCSD students and families agree that playful learning is critical to their education experience. We've also heard multiple times over that play is even more important now because of COVID-19. This parent leader said, "I want my kids to have the best possible opportunities to learn. Play can help them get through the last 18 months and grow." As we've gone through this process, we've created a definition of playful learning that Dr. Wright has helped us expand upon in his keynote tonight. Playful learning is both structured and unstructured. It's providing experiences to students and families that maximizes the potential of play in education. So playful learning opportunities for our community include things like recess, brain breaks, field trips, hands-on experiential learning opportunities, school clubs, school teams, after school, art, music, physical education, and play-based curriculum. So play and curricular and instructional practice. So really thinking about play just beyond daily active recess, and play being a mechanism where our students can enjoy, really experience the joy of learning and experience learning in new ways that allow them to foster their creativity and receive all of those benefits that both Wade and Dr. Wright talked about today. When we asked students and families what their priorities were for playful learning, they shared with us that the things they would like to see, what they would prioritize as playful learning experiences is recess, play in curricular and instructional practice, and experiential learning experiences. And when we pulled all of this data together, we learned what their vision is for playful learning in the district. And I feel like I should have a drum roll for this because we've been talking about this a lot this whole session. But this is our community's vision for playful learning. This is what students and families have shared with us. Play is central to the education and well-being of our children. To support our kids, we must maximize the potential of play in a culturally responsive and sustaining way within our education system. All children, that's from pre-K through 12th grade, in the Rochester City School District must have equitable access to playful learning and unstructured play opportunities throughout the school day, in school, out of school, and during the summer. So really thinking about this continuum of learning experiences for our children. When we surveyed everybody and we're talking around, it was very clear that there are some very strong strengths and bright spots in our district. So 78% of students and families shared that some playful learning is actually happening at their school. So we're already in a good spot of that stuff is happening right now. They shared with us that some successful models exist in school buildings already. We have district champions, whether there's administrators, teachers, or staff that are available to share best practice because they figured it out. So to Dr. Wright's point earlier of finding that those play champions and grouping together, those exist. We have some very strong play champions in our district. We also have a number of policies in place that are very supportive of playful learning experiences for our scholars. We have a number of parents and families that want more playful learning and are looking to ways to support these efforts. And so how great is it that we have all of these RCSD families and scholars willing to fight in partnership with our district to say, we need this playful learning opportunity to happen. So when it comes to looking for resources and funding, there's a whole base ready to go. They are ready to fight for this for their kids. They're ready to fight for this for themselves. We do have, despite the lack of resources that everybody was talking about earlier, we do actually have substantial resources coming into the district directed towards playful learning. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to barriers. And just like we said, there's parents, there's also students wanting to push forward playful learning, and they're willing to support the effort to make that happen. When we ask some of the barriers to playful learning and to this experience for kids, for our kids, 100% of RCSD students and families shared that they are not, that not all of the playful learning experience they want to see are available to them in their school. And so their school might be really great at recess, but not so great at field trips. And so the experience is really fragmented across the board. And so one school might be doing one thing, another school might be doing the other, but none of the school buildings are successfully meeting those expectations of families and students. Some of the barriers that were identified throughout this process of really, families and students shared, there's a limited understanding of how play supports academic success. So really thinking about, this is not an addition to, it is a support with. And so many of those standards that we are looking to, or metrics we are looking to achieve as a district, play is actually supportive of them. And so when we provide these experiences, we are enriching our students and ultimately going to get towards better outcomes overall. We also noted that there is an inequitable division of resources, so not all kids are having those same learning experiences. And what we heard loud and clear from many families is that we have a number of schools in the district that are highly resourced and a number of schools that are under-resourced. And those highly resourced schools typically get more resources because there is the capacity to look for those resources. And there is not that equitable distribution across the board to make sure all of our students are receiving the same education experience. We also heard from families and educators that the teacher's role in advancing playful learning is not clear. We know that there's new next generation standards that have been implemented that are supportive, but it is a challenging environment for our educators right now in trying to meet the needs of our students and meet the needs of what's required by the state and navigating all of that stuff. Dr. Wright talked about this as well, but it was also very clear from the work that the education system is not child-centered or working in a way that best supports our kids. And so I feel like that's a little self-explanatory, but we're, as Dr. Wright said, the decisions that are being made are not really necessarily always in the best interest of what is best for that child. It's not a priority for some administrators. Like I said, there is that ongoing tension between meeting those academic standards, those outcomes, that the data, right, of what we're trying to achieve as a district. And so play sometimes gets lost in the mix, right? There is no grade that goes on the report card that gets reported to the Board of Regents around how well are you doing with playful learning. Like we said, play is that addition that helps support those outcomes. And then what was very clear is that there was a number of organizations funneling significant resources into the district to support playful learning, whether that was professional development, whether that was technical assistance, resource support, but they weren't working together. And so that was causing this siloed effect of some schools getting all of this attention, some not. And so moving forward, families really shared that we need to start addressing those silos in the nonprofit community and as organizations in order to be able to move forward this vision for playful learning. Families, when we asked them what they wanted to see more of in their learning experience, we heard field trips, school clubs, experiential learning, recess after school. All of these things are very important to students and families. And as you can see, there's not that much differentiation between all of this, because what happened when we did this survey is we heard a lot of all of this is important. How do we prioritize all of these activities? This is how we want to create this vision for playful learning. So what are our opportunities as a community? And, this is where we'll talk in a little bit about a report that we're currently developing that will come out next month, which will go in much further depth into all of these action items. This is our kickoff celebration tonight, but this work is ongoing. It will take all of you on this call and many, many others, all recruiting within our own networks to make this happen, to bring this to light in the district. What was clear as some potential opportunities for this work is our RCSD families and students. So often they go unheard. Their voices go unheard. They're not listened to or respected in the way that they should. And what we have learned over the course of this work and in our work in general here at Healthi Kids is that RCSD students and families are ready. They are ready to fight. They are ready to disrupt. They are ready to move to bring this into action. And so when we think about things like, I'm seeing in the chat some notes about recess being taken away as a form of punishment or being canceled. We have a number of family and students who are ready to go and fight for those things. And so let us view our families and students as the assets that they are, as the consumers of our education system. Let's center them in our decision-making process and move forward together. We have a lot of opportunity for professional development, like we shared, as so many organizations have resources for this work. That means a lot of professional development can happen and is happening. And so as organizations, we need to start partnering, building those partners, understanding who's doing what, and offering some of those resources out in a more consistent way to educators who are looking to advance this in their classroom. And so how do we leverage those resources, the organizational supports, to provide that necessary professional development to share out the message of why playful learning is so important. Professional development went hand in hand with partnerships, so I won't explain that one, but folks are ready to partner on this. They are ready to work together. And so as a community, we need to be working together to push forward this vision. We need to expand those best practices. There are so many bright spots currently happening in the Rochester City School District We heard of a number of school buildings that are really rocking it out when it comes to curricular practice, instructional practice. You know, they've figured out how to do this. There's schools that have figured out how to do recess really well. And despite all of not maybe having as many resources as they would like, teachers have figured it out. There's principals that have figured it out. And so how do we share that knowledge amongst one another? How do we amplify those bright spots? And how do we make sure all school buildings know, oh, this school over here has figured it out. How do we take their model and bring it here? We also heard from students and families that we really need to be relying on some student and family-led projects. How great would it be to have our RCSD scholars create a whole campaign on the importance of playful learning and have them educate our school board members and principals and administrators over why this is so important. And so, like we said in the first bullet, the first opportunity of, we can never discredit our students and families in the district. We need to find those opportunities to amplify and push forward the projects they want to see happen in the district. Not just what we want to do as organizations, what we as a district want to do. Let's listen to our students and families and see, because the ideas that come from them are phenomenal. And finally, you know, we talked about funding a lot, right? And we all know that we could always use more funding here in the district, that we have faced significant financial barriers. We have faced a significant deficit. But, you know, can we be working together to think about those opportunities for increased funding? So whether that is looking at new streams of funding through the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, to applying to collective grants together to leverage this work. You know, it doesn't need to always be state and federal dollars to support this, right? We did all of this work thanks to the support of the Greater Rochester Health Foundation locally. And so there are funders interested in this work, and the more that we can show partnership, collaboration, and work together, the better. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Beatrice again so that she can talk about just some next steps. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A again, as we have built in some time for that. So if you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A function, as you have been doing throughout this whole thing, and we will do our best to answer what we can.
Thanks, Jen. I just pulled it up, so give me one quick second. And please excuse the noise. My grandson is actually playing right behind me. So next steps, we have PlayWorks supporting residents and reclaiming their neighborhoods for play. That is actually tomorrow, and that is in partnership with the City of Rochester's Department of Recreation and Human Services and PlayWorks. And it is an interactive training for any resident, family, organization, or parent looking to host a play day in their neighborhood in the future. And the training will provide tips, tricks, and game ideas that can support any inclusive play day in your neighborhood. Can you give me one quick second? Inclusive active play and its positive impact on children's brains and bodies. That's actually happening November 6th, and it's a workshop on Zoom, and it's a training for all pre-K teachers in the Rochester City School District with Dr. Diane Kraft. Diane is a national early childhood physical activity expert. Diane works in specializing in providing educators with the tools they need to advance physical activity opportunities for preschool children with and without disabilities. She is a professor at the State University at New York at Cortland, and is currently a consultant for the CDC and the New York State Department of Health. PlayROCs, the RCSD, a community vision for playful learning. Our report So the planning team is currently developing a report of our findings and recommendations to move this vision forward for playful learning. And we will be launching a report in both English and Spanish in November 2021. Ages and stages of play and how racism interrupts it. That is also a workshop on December 3rd. We're partnering Rock the Future to bring Dr. Ariana Brazier from ATL Parent Like a Boss to Rochester. Dr. Ariana's research specializes in the way Black children play and is the founder of the national nonprofit ATL Parent Like a Boss. The organization advances a strengths-based approach to highlighting and extending literacy building practices Black families already possess. They seek to enhance literacy, social and self-awareness, and educational growth in the communities they serve. We will be hosting a workshop on Friday, December 3rd for educators, organizations, and parents interested in this work. And Advancing Literacy Through Play, December 4th is a virtual play day. So Dr. Ariana Brazier, her mom, Julie Brazier, will host an interactive virtual play day with families and students. The interactive play day is a fun, interactive way for families to connect with one another. Join Healthi Kids in our work to advance playful learning in the district. To learn more about these opportunities, join our mailing list at info@healthikids.org. I'm gonna put the link in the chat for you all as well. So you can join that way. And I'm gonna drop that now for you all there. And then join us in this work together. We're going to continue to partner with our residents and organization leaders to make this vision come to life in Rochester. But we do need you, and join us by emailing the info@healthikids.org. And to learn more about PlayROCs Advocacy, you can email myself at beatrice.lebron@commongroundhealth.org. And I'm going to drop the information here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice. So I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat that we'll do our best to respond. And one of it, what events do you have planned for non-teachers but future teachers? So a little bit about the professional development that we offer and are doing in partnership is that we view educators as a very wide-ranging definition. So if you are working in buildings or looking to work in buildings, if you are a teacher, administrator, paraprofessional, support staff, if you are a parent and go in and volunteer in your child's classroom, you are all welcome to our to any event that we put on. If you are a student leader who is interested in pushing this word, you are welcome to come. For that attendee, if you are a future teacher and interested, you are more than welcome to sign up. We have one question from Ricky Frazier that says, what are some districts across the country that do well for play for students and their communities? That is something our report is actually going to dive a little bit deeper into. We've been doing some exploration to see how districts across the country are implementing playful learning in this way. And so stay tuned for that report next month. I don't know if Mr. Regent Norwood is still here and with us, but Cam Johnson has a question related to the New York State Department of Education and how what work is being done with the department on how to incorporate free play into the academic school day.
I am still here, Jen. Happy to respond. I would say that because of the work of the Healthi Kids Coalition here in town and your many partnerships, the state education department can boast on the fact that its early childhood policy statements, the Blue Ribbon Commission on Early Childhood final report, and the pre-K learning standards all are very well rooted in celebrating the power of play. Much of the language of those documents looks like the language that we've been using here. Where I think the opportunity for improvement is that I don't think that the state education department's policy frameworks really support play as integral to children's development across the life course trajectory. I don't think that it exists as powerfully as it should in the upper elementary, middle school, and high school grades. And I think that that is a great opportunity for this work to continue to be advanced to fill in that gap. But more importantly, given the fact that the education department does not promulgate curriculum at the local level, it is incredibly important that we all understand this is I am speechless. I can't come up with a word of just how invaluable it is for the advocacy at the local level to continue and to operationalize policy framework by, as you all have suggested, the actual practice in the classroom and the actual culture in the school building. For me, and I really love Beatrice LeBron allowing us to see the culture of Healthi Kids and how we run meetings. Play should be loud, and Healthi Kids should be loud. And if we have school buildings where children feel comfortable knowing that their time for free unstructured play means that not only are they free physically to move around, but they're free to be loud, then we're creating environments where young people can grow and they can be their authentic selves. Sorry to talk so long answer, but great question from the floor.
Thanks, Wade. Appreciate that. We got one question here about what are our recommendations for scholars in the RCSD that are currently experiencing recess cancellations during school because it's only October. Beatrice, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
No, I actually would love to take this question, primarily because it is a board policy that Healthi Kids did work on alongside with a number of parents, and there continues to be a wellness policy that Jen is leading, but alongside with educators and staff and also our families in the district. What I would ask is that if you are a parent whose child has had that experience, first and foremost, please keep record of the time and date if you can remember. I know it's hard, but also I would love to personally know whether you email me at Common Ground Health. Jen would love to know. So let me just share that. You can share with either one of us, and in both our roles and hats, we certainly want to address that. That is coming up again with the wellness policy in the district in a few months. And Jen has been working with some families and some staff within the district to figure out ways to address that. But I certainly feel like as a board member that it is part of my job, my other job, to hold people within the district accountable to our policies. And recess is important. It should never be taken away from a student. For some kids, that is literally the only opportunity that they'll have to have just have a break time, a mental break, and be around their peers. And let me just share one more thing. As many of you may know, I have a 10-year-old, she's back here too. She also lets me know when recess is impacted in her school so that I can address it. But certainly we want to hear those stories and collect them, and we will fight with you, alongside you at all levels to correct that and address that immediately. Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice. And just to say, we at Healthi Kids currently have a work group of parent leaders and organizational partners developing some recommendations for the district's wellness policy. It is up for review in June, so it's a great time to really think about how are we promoting wellness overall as a district. And so if you're interested in joining that work with us, please reach out to info@healthikids.org, or you can email Beatrice or I about that. We would love to have you, and especially if you are a student leader, we'd love your voice. I think we're going to wrap up, if that's all right for everybody. We can give you back some of your time. I just want to close up by thanking everybody for this evening. To Dr. Brian Wright, thank you so much for your wisdom, energy, space tonight. We appreciate you so much here in Rochester. And there's a couple of comments in the Q&A of that every single RCSD organization educator should be seeing your presentation and hearing this from you. And so we agree. And so we just want to thank you so much for spending your evening with us and just sharing space with us this evening. To Sasha Lewis, thank you as our parent leader on our planning team, but also for stepping in and up to do the introduction. Thank you to our 25-member planning committee, to all of you for stepping in and supporting us in this work. We could not have done any of this without you. To Healthi Kids staff and the team at Common Ground Health, you are appreciated and loved so much from us, and thank you again. And then most importantly, to everybody who came out tonight. This is going to take some work. It is going to take all of us, each and every one of us, like we said, to push forward this vision for playful learning in the Rochester City School District. And so please join us in this work. If you haven't already, reach out to us at info@healthikids.org. Visit our website, www.healthikids.org. Our team will meet with you. We will share with you knowledge. We will connect you in. We cannot do this alone. We are better together, and together we can improve our outcomes for our kiddos. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you to our interpreters tonight, to both our ASL interpreters and to our Spanish interpreter for the evening. So have a wonderful evening, everybody. And we will be in touch because we are in this together.
Bye.
Bye.